most small businesses don't really feel like they're a threat. I mean, they're at risk of being compromised, and they couldn't be any uh, less true because um, the automated systems that are going out and looking for the low hanging fruit are they don't care if you're a small business or a large business.
So, Clark, I can let you kick it off and maybe introduce your guests, and you could all tell us a minute or two about yourselves and what led you down this journey to network security, and then maybe go into a little bit of conversation about what are some of the things you guys are seeing these days.
Sure, you bet. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Randy, for including us. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so we've been doing everything we can to help communicate the threat vectors and risks and things to do, not only for our clients but for the community at large. Again, my name is Clark Thompson. I'm with Network Tech. Network Technologies is a managed IT service provider, and we've been around in this market for quite a while and really focus on cybersecurity for our clients. One of the reasons we've been successful in the last few years is that our posture and our focus on cybersecurity is the most important part. We are a service company and we help people with regular, normal, everyday problems, but making sure that they're secure is the primary focus. And we've got a couple of folks on the call that have a lot more technical expertise than I do. Um, and I want to quickly introduce Matt Cortner, Jeremiah Reid, and David Matt. Um, Matt Cortner and JJ and I work together at Network Tech. I'll let them explain their roles. And David Matt is with a company that we do a lot of work with called 10D Security. And 10D focuses on the um, testing the environment and making sure they find the holes. And we're actually involved in helping mitigate and close those gaps in security. So, Matt, I'll hand it off to you and let you introduce yourself, talk about your role at Network Tech, and go from there.
Great, thanks, Clark. My name is Matt Cortner, and yep, like Clark said, I work for Network Technologies. Been there about 8.5 years, and before that, I had a company of my own doing a lot of consumer coming to the house, fixing the computer type things. Merged with another gentleman for about 4 years, and then took off my entrepreneurial hat and came to work with Network Technologies as in tech support, and worked my way through the ranks. COO now for Network Technologies, and yeah, I was real excited when Clark explained this forum to me. It's a passion of mine, as it is, I know, of Jeremiah's. Jeremiah and JJ are the same person, by the way. If you hear both of those names, uh, I'm a former baseball player. I like short 1, 2 syllable names. I like to put a Y at the end of most of those names too, like JJ. So, but yeah. So my role is as a COO is to kind of keep my hands in everything. And one of the huge things that we're driving forward with is security. And we kind of look at it as a community duty of ours, not just to protect ourselves, but to help protect homes now that we're all working at home, as well as businesses. So it's a big passion of mine. I kind of take it as fight against the bad guys, so to speak, because as you may hear later on today, they're pretty sophisticated, and so we got to get pretty sophisticated. But I'll let JJ Jeremiah explain his role and what he's doing.
Hey, good morning. I'm Jeremiah Reid. Really happy to be here today. I've been doing IT now for about 10 years. I came to network technologies about 4 years ago from Kansas State University, where I had done some information technology work there as well. Um, I have assisted primarily with our regulated clients, the clients that we manage that have compliance needs that they need to meet and need to be tested on a regular basis. And from that, I was recently given the title of IT operations manager, and so I oversee our centralized services unit, which handles all of our infrastructure needs, and our IT operations team, which actually does the network and security operations for network technologies as a company, and not just for our clients. I can't say much more than what Matt had already said. I have a presence in the MSP community, where we all get together and discuss, uh, threat vectors that are ongoing issues that we all as a community need to address. And we're all interested in protecting the security, the needs, the privacy of our clients, and finding ways that we can do that, regardless of what company that we work for. We're all working together to ensure that the good guys are outpacing the bad guys.
Let me add something real quick to what JJ just said. We have about 30 employees, and about 26 of them are technical in nature, where they're able to help clients fix problems. JJ fixes. We have one person dedicated to just our team, our company, and that's JJ. So that's how important it is for us to make sure we don't think, I thought someone was going to handle that. No, it's just JJ for our entire company. So uh, I would hand it off to Dave Matt at this point.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Just briefly, I'm the senior IT auditor at 10D Security. I just celebrated my 8-year anniversary. That was last week. So I've got some longevity finally in my work career. Prior to that, I had done IT administration, network administration, and IT management at a couple banks in the Kansas City and St. Louis metro area. So my experience is all trial by fire type experience, real world, particularly at financial institutions, having to get in and turn wrenches to protect an environment, mitigate risk, put security controls in place, et cetera. So at 10D, my role, as an IT auditor, I get to go to primarily financial institutions are the bulk of our customers, but we really have all types of customers. But I get to help clients sort of find those holes that JJ talked about earlier. I think it was JJ. Find the holes to fill, right? Because sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees. So we come in as an independent entity to say, here's your stuff that needs fixed, and try to help provide some guidance and to try to help keep them off the news. And important for financial institutions, keep them out of the crosshairs of the examiners too, because as a regulated industry, the examiners have they have a lot of things that they have to have just so. So we help them get that from an IT security perspective. We help them get that, and it's really my pleasure to do so. I really enjoy helping customers, make their environment better. So that's about it for me.
Awesome. My last role in a big public company, we had a whole corporate security team. But most everybody on this call are your typical Kansas City mid-sized to small businesses and organizations. And I doubt if very many or anybody on here have their own corporate security teams. So what should we be watching out for? What's the latest things that are going on that are attacking our organizations that the folks on here should be aware of?
Well, I can discuss that a little bit. So one, the first thing that you can do is arm yourself with information. Finding a good threat feed There's some good ones that are available from the federal government, from state governments, and from organizations. The CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, has some good feeds that are primarily aimed at watching for threats from national state actors, malicious actors from around the world. But they also do a pretty good job of analyzing trends and delivering news on what's going on today. Uh, so what you see by and large, and if you haven't, take a look at the Verizon breach investigation report. It's a really fantastic report that's put out every year by Verizon information security teams that break down and analyze breaches and incidents that happen over the course of the previous year. Uh, and so what you see is credential theft is number one. And I know that some of that was talked about earlier. And credential theft typically happens with a phishing campaign. So somebody sends you an email and they get you to click on a link or reply with some information. And at that point, they're able to identify credentials and use that to access your network and start doing whatever they really want to do. Um, and so training is number one above everything else. All the $1 million firewalls and security analyzers and everything else. What we're responsible for to get to our staff is current trends, what to look for, and keeping that training up to date, regularly verifying that they're going through the training from start to finish, and that they have a good understanding of what that training contained. Uh, and typically, if I had to boil it down to one point, if you wanted to come away with from that training with one point, it's always to look for anything with urgency. If somebody's telling you need to do something sensitive right now, you got to look real close, because that's not something that you're going to see on a day-to-day basis. Urgency is key, and so usually it pivots from the credential theft. Today, the most common malware that you'll hear about is ransomware, and there are about a dozen different really popular strains. Uh, and so that's typically the vector that will get pushed from a credential theft. And what that does is they come in and they try to touch everything on your network, and they encrypt it so that you can't use it. And then they'll send you a message, or they'll put a file on your desktop that says, "Hey, if you want access to your stuff, then you're going to have to pay us in Bitcoin or some other kind of anonymized money transfer." And recently, the OFAC put out a statement that says if you pay that ransom to countries that are on a list, that you could face steep fines from the federal government. So not only do you have to respond and get your company back up and running, but you might also face fines from the federal government. So the it seems like we're facing threats from both sides, and it would be nice if we could get a little bit more support from an information security standpoint. So, with all of that going on, it really gets back to, and I'm going to say everything I wanted to say in the whole hour right now, but it really gets back to having a plan, being able to walk through that plan, keeping your staff updated. Um, and so that's typically what we see today, is that lack of training that leads to something uh, having credentials stolen. And once credentials are stolen, then they can get into a network, and typically you're going to see encryption at work.
And I want to point out another thing, that most small businesses don't really feel like they're a threat. I mean, they're at risk of being compromised, and they couldn't be any less true, because um, the automated systems that are going out and looking for the low hanging fruit, they don't care if you're a small business or a large business. And we've had a lot of clients come on board because they've been compromised and they need help, and they're small, and their systems are locked down. I don't know if you saw the news this morning that hospitals are around the country are being attacked for malware and ransomware, and they can't admit patients because they can't even use their systems. So, but Dave, I want you to go and respond to Randy's question as well about what you're seeing.
I would have to concur a lot with Jeremiah. We often agree on this. You know, with ransomware, you've got targets of opportunity, which is the low-hanging fruit that you're talking about. That's the everyday, even small businesses. But you also have determined attackers who are spending extra time to get into a network and to camp out, understand the environment, locate the backups, etc. And those are the ones that the higher profile, typically ones that you hear about on the news, say the large GPS company in the Olathe area, or any of these hospitals. These are not drive-by targets of opportunities. These are well-planned, carefully crafted instances where, you know, the institutions at some point have no recourse other than to pay. And so, you know, that frontline defense of security awareness training is 95% of the battle. And the unfortunate thing about that is never going to be perfect, because people are people and they have fingers and they click things. And social engineering works very, very well. And it only has to work well once to get sort of a little toehold on the environment. And then, you know, once you get that little toehold on the environment, it's not generally given enough time and patience. It's not that difficult for bad actors to get keys to the kingdom. So that all sounds very scary and hyperbolic. And in many cases, it is. And so people want to know, what can we do? And again, we always reinforce security awareness training. Do it throughout the year. Do email testing. There's lots of companies out there that will do stuff like that. And really the idea is to just kind of continually, not to the point of annoyance, but enough to keep people aware, because it ebbs over time, it wanes. And so the more frequently you do security or you do social engineering type testing, emails and such, the better it will keep everybody's security awareness level up. But there is a fine line between being annoying and sending out test emails all the time and you know, keeping people sort of on point. But again, it will never be 100% perfect, because human beings are always the last link in the chain, and the unfortunately, it's so cliche to say, but you know, that's all it takes. It's just one click is all it takes.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. We have a couple of questions too. KnowBe4 is a testing and training program. A lot of companies in the industry use it. I think it's a great program. You can set perpetual campaigns to be as less severe or real severe as far as how tough it is to detect if this is a spam or not. So yeah, KnowBe4 would be definitely one that I would look at. You can do that individually or as a company. The security past your network firewall, I bet both David and Jeremiah have some opinion on that. And then the Apple versus PC security, I've heard that quite a bit, you know, and I'll touch on it. I'm assuming that they have a lot more than I do on that, but for me, you know, yes, typically PCs are going to get hacked or they'll get infiltrated a lot easier, but Apple is definitely not 100% secure. There are ways to get into both of them. There are vulnerabilities that show up all the time, kind of leading to what JJ was talking about staying up up on the latest and greatest. And so I'd be curious to hear what both Jeremiah and David have to say about the security past the firewall and some Apple PC or the difference between Apple and PC security.
Okay. Well, I'll start with that first question, the need for security past your network firewall, and really that's something that everybody in the country has learned a whole lot about in the last 8 months, as we're working from home more, working remote more, and having to deal with uh, devices that have to leave the safety and security of the corporate network and still get work accomplished. We've handled that a couple of ways internally. Some of the solutions that could be more permanent are things like a virtual desktop infrastructure. So you're moving your servers and your desktops up to the cloud. Your users would have access into that through a secure VPN tunnel or some other secure communication. And then all of that exists remotely wherever you are in the world. You're connecting into that controlled virtual infrastructure in the cloud. And that's really probably the height of outside of the network firewall where an employee might be. But going kind of back to the basics. So if you were working in an office on Monday and Tuesday you couldn't, you had to go home, you still had to get work done. It's incredibly difficult to manage the network environment for everybody's homes. It's really difficult to go out and get a business or enterprise grade firewall and install it in your house and manage it and secure it and take care of you. So looking for ways around that, the traditional approach is an SSL VPN, and that's encrypted on both ends, and you dial back into your network, and all of the network traffic typically then will be sent to your company and go through the security infrastructure you have in your company before it's processed and you do work. Um, and so that's typically the direction we go. Now, to control those endpoints, we don't have their firewall in front of it. Typically, we don't have all of the security software, all of the agents that are monitoring and recording event logs, because that tends to start getting into a privacy concern on personal devices. So one of the things that we have started to do is implement DNS level security agents on personal machines, where we're preventing them from getting fooled into going to the wrong place. And so I guess the answer to that is it's incredibly difficult because you're dealing with environments, and it's kind of segue into that second question, Apple versus PC security, where you don't know what exists on the network at home. And so what you're trying to do is get them to lean back towards or use resources to access your corporate infrastructure. And so getting that set up and getting that access configured and testing it on a regular basis and making sure that it's updated is key. Dave, you want to talk any more about that?
Yeah, sure. So you hit on a couple of points that that I was going to cover, which essentially is, when this all happened and people scrambled to keep the business going, we saw some people that made poor choices. Hey, go to Best Buy and buy 10 laptops, right? And then send them home and oh gosh, we got to get them on. So let's open up remote desktop protocol on the firewall, right? And then so these are just nightmare scenarios because you've got an insecure access to your internal network on that's available to everybody in the entire world, and then you've sent people home with laptops that are unmanaged. And so it's for me it boils down to how are you going to let folks access the stuff that they need to do work, and if you're going to send people home with laptops, if you're going to provide that, then that needs to be a trusted, managed device. So we really prescribe that folks treat those remote machines just like they would an internal machine sitting at a desktop, right? Make sure that it's has all of your controls. It's joined to Active Directory for overall management and policy stuff. It attaches to your antivirus, your managed antivirus. It's in there. It's got all the protections of. It's routing all of its traffic through your internet connection, through the VPN, and then out the corporate internet connection, so you can have all your content filtering controls. And to Jeremiah's point, sometimes what we've seen is there's been a lot of times where there's been split tunneling. In other words, to get to the work stuff, you go through the VPN. To get to the internet, you go out your own internet, and then you lose the benefit of any web content filtering that may lie at your firewall. So, we see a lot of people doing some, like on box web content filtering, or DNS based like Umbrella, or I think they're probably the big player there. But we see some folks with, some antivirus has web content filtering built in that, so for me, I can boil it down to say my perfect scenario for work from home is going to be a company provided device with its firewall on, right? Its built-in firewall on, using SSL VPN, tunneling all of its traffic over that SSL VPN to do work and to get to the internet. That's the best case scenario. There are other ways to do it. There are other ways to present internal stuff so that you can work like via Citrix, or there's other ways to do it that you can use an untrusted device for, but you have to make all these compromises when you do that. From a usability standpoint, et cetera. So, because if you just get presented a screen, you may be missing some functionality as opposed to being able to actually get on your network. So yeah, we really, really, really harp on making sure that those devices are managed, and they are treated just like any other device in your network, with all the security that they would have if it were sitting inside your building.
So, and I wish I could speak more about the Apple versus PC security question, but I've been a Windows engineer for over a decade, and that's what I learned in the early 90s. Um, so really, the big difference is that walled garden that Apple provides, and anything that you install on that device has to have been approved by Apple, and they have a certificate system that manages those installers. And on the Windows side, you've got a good and a bad thing, because you can do anything you want with it, but that means so can the bad guys. And it's all about proper management, and the proper tool set to monitor that. Um, and it really comes down to a personal preference, and whether or not the company has the ability to manage and support those devices. Um, Coming from the university world, we had entire departments that were entirely Apple run. And they needed a different infrastructure to manage and support that than the rest of the university, which traditionally ran on a Microsoft or open source operating systems. So that's something to take into account. Is that typically you're going to need a different set of management tools for Apple versus a Windows environment. One is not inherently better than the other. You'll see that typically the reason that Windows is more targeted is because it essentially runs the world. Between that and the open source operating systems, that accounts for the great majority of devices that get work done on a daily basis. Um, and if you saw that Apple devices started to rise in that, and we did see that a little bit towards the end of last year. And a little bit early this year, as ransomware started to kick off, is that you would see more exploits for Apple devices. And and for me, what I see is a regular update cadence from Microsoft, and that they do a good job of disclosure when a vulnerability is reported. They take care of it, um, and Apple continues to be kind of that walled garden approach, unless somebody, a white hat or somebody who's a security researcher identifies a threat on an Apple device, and they exceed the traditional 90-day window of disclosing it and giving them 90 days to patch that hole. Traditionally, you don't hear a lot about that from Apple. Um, so it could go either way. And if the government is doing anything to get on the offensive, they're probably not telling us about it. Um, and the hard part about getting on the offensive is that when you're dealing with international threat actors, and for the most part, the internet is kind of ruled from countries like Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, company or countries that have a vested interest in disrupting activity in the United States. But it's really hard for our government to go in and punish the threat actors in those locations. And it's so bad that we dealt with one ransomware incident at the end of last year that we completed very early this year, getting it all cleaned up. Was the security researcher that we discussed the incident with and who helped negotiate the ransom payment knew who the bad guy was, knew where he lived, knows what car he drives. But there's nothing that the United States can really do about it because he's a Russian national living in Russia. Um, and so that's kind of the hard part of the international level scale is that typically we're dealing with people that we can't go after. You can't sue them. You can't really the you're you're really only your sorry really your only recourse is being prepared ahead of time, having an insurance carrier that provides information security type ransomware insurance coverage, and to meet that, the bar is getting higher and higher to be awarded those packages. um, uh, Dave, Matt, do you guys want to jump in on
Sure.
the government level?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to, I, when we start talking, I feel kind of defeatist when we start talking about it at the government level. There's not much that they can do to be proactive. This is, it's kind of guerrilla warfare. We don't necessarily know where they're going to pop up. And so uh, uh, your best bet is just to be on the defense, to make sure you're prepared, to make sure you've got your backups in good shape. We highly recommend offline backups at this point, to make sure that there's no way to get at a copy of your data in case something happens. I'll step back just a second and talk about Apple versus PC, because I did miss that, and I apologize. One of the reasons why Apple doesn't get, okay, so let's split Apple for a second. Apple, you've got the laptops and desktops that they have with the Mac OS 10 operating system, or whatever it is now, OS 11 or 14, and then you've got your mobile devices where you've got your iPad, your iPad Pro, your iPhone. And so these are two different types of environments. On the desktop side, it's still fairly open. You can still install the software that you want. It's getting to be more of a walled garden where there's more protections, but you can still install anything you want on a Mac. And the reason that those systems don't get attacked as much is because there isn't as many of them, right? Why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money's at. So you go over to the PC side because that's where your biggest surface area is. There's billions of PCs as opposed to the number of Macs. Now, it gets interesting because when you get to iOS devices, Apple iPhones, iPads, etc., that's a totally different, everything is completely locked down. There is no way, except for in the rare instances of an available jailbreak, there's really no way to hack those. And to that point, there is no such thing as antivirus for an iPhone or an iPad. Doesn't exist because Apple won't let you get down into that layer of the operating system. So those devices, arguably, are inherently safer for, but you don't use those devices to do work usually. But what we see as a just in technology in general, we see we're moving towards being able to use those types of devices on a day-to-day basis to do work. You can get the full Microsoft Office suite or 99% of it on an iPad Pro, and it's just as good as any laptop and infinitely safer, right? Currently, right? Your mileage may vary. It's anything can change at any time, but the potential there is to that those tightly controlled endpoint devices, such as those iOS devices, and I would argue that Android can be just as secure too. The problem there is the whole sideload thing, where you can put anything you want, including non-curated approved applications. So I think the future, what we'll see is you'll have more secure endpoints. Everything will be untrusted by default. And there'll be better ways to work with corporate data, cloud hosted, where you'll kind of be relying on them also for backups and recovery and resiliency, as it were. And you'll just be accessing the data sort of on that pane of glass, either in your hand or an iPad or some other tablet of that nature. I think that's probably that's where I think that we'll be in 10 years. I hate to make that kind of a total prediction, but it just makes sense. We can't trust anything anymore. So the more locked down your device is, the safer that it is. So.
There's a lot of stuff you guys have talked about that sounds really, really smart and that I really, really don't know how to do. And so there, when you think about, I know you guys are in the business of selling this, so that's clearly what you and others want people, organizations to do is buy it. But what about your small single person office or a single person work from home where maybe they don't have the budget to hire help? How can they do all of these smart things you just said? What's a simple thing to do? Is there an easy way to do this that someone can do at home?
I would start by having a good understanding of the vendors that you work with. So if you're using software provided from Intuit to do your financials, or you're using a website that has specific tools that you use, try to develop at least an entry level rapport with that vendor. Find a group, a community that also uses that software, so that any developments that come up is something that you're aware of. And that's number one, is really to know your tools. What do you use on a daily basis to get work done? Most you can run down to a Best Buy or a Fry's and pick up a small business router, but and you should have that. I wouldn't, if you're going to do work from home, if you're going to have a business that you're running remotely, or even if it's in an office, I would ensure that you're not using the router that your internet service provider gives you. I would get one that you can. Sorry, I had a couple. I was going to hold them up, but you can just run down and get a router. Do some research on what you can do to make that a little bit more secure. But what you're doing is you're taking the data, the packets that are coming from your network going out into the world, and you're taking a little bit more control of that. And you can do that fairly cheap. A good home router, a small business router, will run you anywhere from $100 to $300, depending on the number of buttons that you want it to have. And then you can still get the same enterprise grade antivirus tools for the most part in a consumer plan. It's always good to go the business route, because when you go the business route, typically you get support that has an SLA. You will get a response in such and such time frame, and that's really what you're paying that extra for. If you can, I'd go that route, because you can hold their feet to the fire if they don't meet those SLA requirements that they've put out there. Um, so it's about taking the time to understand what you're working with, the software and the hardware that you have available, and taking some time to think about and do the research on what you can do to kind of harden that home network. It's beyond that, it's kind of hard to give vague advice, and I'd be happy to discuss with anybody, if they have something specific that they have set up. Uh, Here's what we could do to help you improve that. That's just me personally.
Mhm.
Uh, from my perspective, the stronger all of us are, the weaker the bad guys are.
Right. Right.
The less opportunity they have to just kind of drive by, knock on a door, oh, it's unlocked, and come in, the better everybody is going to be, because they're inherently lazy. If they can't just swing in and drop their malicious payloads and step back, then they're going to move on to the next house. And if that house is locked, they're going to move on to the next house, and pretty soon they're going to move on to a different neighborhood. And that's the goal of these communities, and opening up those lines of communication between is understanding. It's like the old neighborhood watch. Hey, we saw this. Okay, we're going to implement this control or this software or this hardware to prevent against it. And by and large, you can do the same things at a consumer or small business level as you could from an enterprise level. It's just all about scale, and identifying the vendors that work best for you in your circumstance. Um,
Well, JJ, I'll add on that if you're a small business or a sole proprietor working from home, you have fewer opportunities for employees to click on things. So that's helpful there. But as a small business, whether it's 4 people or 10 or just one, um, what we started this conversation with is just watch out. If something seems urgent, then question it. The other thing is two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication can be done by individuals or consumers or anything, and that is something that I personally recommend to everyone. I ask my family to do it. I ask my friends to do it. I just say, I have a friend who said my I have a Facebook account for my dog and it's been compromised and I can't do anything. I go, well, they have your password now. He goes, well, I changed it. I go, well, no, you have to have 2FA or something to help so that people just can't log into your accounts. And I'll let JJ or Dave, add on to that if you think that's appropriate.
Multi-factor on everything.
Mm-hmm.
If they offer it, turn it on. My poor phone, I've got so many 6-digit codes on my Google Authenticator and Microsoft Authenticator, and I've got FortiToken this, and but all of these things keep it's super important to put multi-factor authentication. Make sure it's everywhere that it can be. So if you've got QuickBooks in the cloud, or your dog has a Facebook account, right? All of these things offer multi-factor authentication in general. Most everything does anymore, so it's definitely in your best interest. And there's been a lot of stuff in the news about SMS being not safe for multi-factor authentication, and NIST doesn't prescribe it as being adequate. But it, for most things, it's okay. Maybe not your bank account, although that's probably all your bank gives you. But SMS is infinitely safer, and it keeps the low-hanging drive-by fruit type bad guys or bad actors from being able to log into your account. They'll move on and make that fast nickel someplace else, as opposed to sitting there trying to get into your account specifically because it's got multi-factor.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of we're just looking at a couple of the questions I wanted to hit for the time is up here. As far as our kids working in the classroom, I've got two upstairs right now. Um, you know, it still goes along those same lines that we're saying about having protection, antivirus at home, uh, uh, um, uh, more than a consumer grade firewall. But unfortunately, what we're all saying is, or fortunately, it's education. It's educating our kids about the bad guys out there. I've been in IT forever, and I have had several conversations. You know, maybe it's a scare tactic a little bit too, but that 13-year-old boy or girl that you're talking to that's in Australia is a 45-year-old man that's living in Kansas City, probably. You know, you can't believe everything you see on the internet. And educating our kids on that is a big way to help communication. And that's, you know, what we're finding, to hit a little bit on the government and whatnot. What we're finding is that communities, technical communities, different industries are coming together and collaborating because there's no other way to understand what's going on in our industries. So there's all kinds of things, groups and communities of different construction and industry or industrial, and of course IT. We're an MSP, so there's a big MSP community on what's going on in the world. What have you guys seen? And that seems to help a lot with awareness. I will say, and I don't sell insurance and any of that, but I will say we had our we're offering ID Shield and Legal Shield to our employees now, and part of that ID Shield is Reputation Shield, and what that does is it actually enrolls your kids in that, and it will go worm through the internet if you say. You set criteria, everything that shows skin or alcohol or drugs or anything. If their picture is associated on the internet and different social media with those criteria, it just removes it. And it's a great insurance, so to speak, to try to help with, you know, so you're not necessarily big brother in your kids. You're not watching, you know, you don't have a thing on their phone that every text and every phone call and everything they do gets sent to you, because you can do that too. But what you're doing is if you're educating them on the front end, and if they do slip up and are seen in a video or a scene in a photo with things that you don't want them to be seen in, the reputation shield will get rid of that. And of course, then you can see what it was that it got rid of and re-educate. But it is all about education. All of us here on the phone didn't have to deal with this stuff when we were kids, and it's a new, big, different thing that we all need to learn how to do. And that kind of goes, if you push that up the chain a little bit, that goes to our employees too. We have a responsibility to our employees, whether you have one or 101, to help educate them on things not to click, things to look for. You know, stop before you use the whole stop, drop, and roll when we were kids on how to get, you know, deal with fires and stuff. It's the same thing here. You got to stop and think. If this looks weird, even if you're the person that always does transactions throughout the day, you got to slow your roll just a little bit to make sure that you're not clicking on the wrong thing.
Does anyone have any questions on two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication? Because we touched on that, but I want to make sure to provide value in this call and answer any questions that anyone has. Good.
Yeah, I need to just stop being annoyed by it, I guess. And
Yeah.
because it slows me down. It's like, gosh, I just want to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
to that also is passphrases instead of passwords. Um, you know, my dog's name with an exclamation point, I guess, you know, was good in the early to mid 90s, but it's easy to find out what your dog's name is now online. You got pictures of them on Facebook. You talk about them, you know, Clark just said he's got a friend that's got a Facebook page for his dog.
He's gonna change his
Well,
dog's name.
yeah, and if you think about, any of the quizzes that you've gone through, or the tests that you've gone through on Facebook that are asking you questions like, what's your favorite color? What was your favorite movie? Those typically are mining tools. They're going to give you a result at the end, but what they're doing is they're collecting data so that they can try to guess your password, try to guess your security answers. Kirsten, you asked a question about how often should small businesses change their passwords? It's actually an evolving response right now. NIST says, like what Matt said, complexity is key. It doesn't necessarily matter how old that password is. It matters how complex it is. And passphrases are typically better than random strings. If you've got a password manager like a LastPass or a Keeper or something like that, that goes a long way to taking that out of your head. You don't have to remember those passwords. You have to remember one long, good, strong password to get access to your passwords. The old answer, though, to answer you directly, the old answer was typically 90 days. You didn't want to have a password really over 90 days without being rotated. But since everything today is driven by a user account with a password, traditionally now we're getting multi-factor authentication layered on top of it. It doesn't make as much sense to rotate the passwords frequently as it does to have good password habits up front, including multi-factor.
Yeah, and don't write them down and put them under your keyboard. That's
Well,
always.
that's actually safer than putting them on a spreadsheet that you save on your desktop.
This is called passwords.
Yeah. LastPass, I love. I was I had been using it since it was in beta. And when it was free for years and years, I was paying them to help with development. I really enjoyed it. I use something now called Keeper, and I've actually enrolled my family in Keeper, um, so that things like our Amazon account or Hulu or Netflix, those are passwords that we all need access to at certain points, and I can grant my family access, and I can revoke access when that's no longer necessary. Let's say he's not getting his homework done, well, he doesn't get access to streaming video. um, and you can do the same thing at a corporate level too. So most of these platforms have some kind of business solution as well, where you can do usernames, passwords. Some of them even offer multi-factor control, so you can put multi-factor on an account and have access to that. And there's varying levels of control. So they can't see the password; they can only use it. They can't change the password; it's rotated automatically. Um, but LastPass, I love from a personal perspective. LastPass was fantastic.
Yeah, use something like that and put two-factor authentication on it, and it makes it a lot easier because you're just clicking on the browser and opening up, going to the website, and it memorizes the password. So you're just right in, and then if you have 2FA on LastPass, then it's hard for people to get in there and do that. So I think that's a good recommendation.
I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of passwords. I know 3.
Yeah,
That's it.
Exactly.
That's it. I know no other. I don't even. All of my passwords, you couldn't say them out loud. They're long and random, and that's really the safest way to be. Use something like LastPass, which I've used for eons too. You've got your passwords with you on your phone. You've got them on your PC. It's got multi-factor authentication. It's everything that you need, and it's well vetted and trusted. There are other companies, 1Password, Dashlane. I think they all have fairly good reputations, but LastPass is where I parked my. That's where I live.
mm-hmm.
And to that point, Google saving your passwords is nice and quick and easy, but not the way you want to go. You definitely want to go with the LastPass type password management system.
Great point. You should never let your browser memorize your password.
You can recover that, and if you can recover that, the bad guys can recover that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that, so that's a new one.
It's
So
easy.
Don't let it save. Okay.
No.
Our biggest enemy in all this is that we're so nice to me. And so if Drew sends me an email, I'm going to assume it's Drew and I'm going to click on it. Or if Adam hands me a thumb drive, I'm going to stick it in because I know Adam. And so I don't think anything bad would be on Adam's thumb drive. What have you seen of just good training curriculum that we can teach all of our people? Don't click, look at the address, because usually there's some little clue in the address that it's not really Drew or it's not really Adam, or to be suspicious of thumb drives or be suspicious of emails.
Yeah, that's a great question. We do use a program called, or a company called KnowBe4. I'll put it in the chat. You guys can check it out. It's actually, the training is headed by a guy named Kevin Mitnick, who used to be in jail for hacking. He pulled off some of the most notorious ones back in the day. He's now flipped to the good side, and he's showing training. I was watching one yesterday where he doesn't even have to get access to your computer. He just needs to know your Gmail account, and he can put a Zoom meeting on your calendar through some pretty sophisticated scripts without even having access to your computer. And you see a Zoom meeting on your Google Calendar. You click on it. Well, it's not a Zoom meeting, and now he has access to your computer. So there's some real sophisticated stuff. We just got to slow down. We just got to slow down and click appropriately. That KnowBe4 is it's a good training. We have our people go through training, about 2 hours worth of training a year, and we have a perpetual vishing and phishing. Vishing meaning they call you on your cell phone and try to get you to allow them access onto your computer. We've seen and heard that before. And then of course, phishing being through email, trying to get access to your computer through email. Yep.
I think Steve had one we missed, and I know Steve leads a peer group of a lot of companies that are probably interested in this question, as are many of us. How do we select a good partner? You know, Steve's question, selecting different things, cybersecurity support. What are good things for people to look for as they look for a partner in this?
I could talk for days, but gentlemen, go ahead.
Well, I think that's one that we all are going to look at from a slightly different perspective. So I see it as my vendor relations. But what you want to get is a history. You want to get references. You want to look for a community. Because you can, and you know, I've been bitten by this, where you get onto a website and you look at all of the bells and whistles and you go, man, that looks awesome. I'm going to go with that. And you know, I didn't do any independent verification. And that's going to be important no matter what you're looking at, is to do a little bit of digging and do some independent verification. You know, find other users, reach out to the company. So we do something called vendor due diligence, and so we have a big checklist of things that any prospective company that we're going to do business with has to go through and fill out and respond and provide responses to. And that's typical in a regulated environment, is that they have to hit this certain list of criteria. But when you're a little bit smaller, maybe you don't have you know, the need to respond to a compliance based need. The never be shy, always ask questions. And if you're not getting answers, you're not getting any responses, you're probably looking at the wrong company. Anymore, you've got a plethora of options for anything, and you want to find somebody who cares enough to respond to you, whether you're 20,000 employees or one employee. You want to find somebody who treats you like you're important to them.
And then I'll add on to that, you know, if you're looking for managed services partner, look for one who has been audited the same way that a regulated business would be audited. And we put ourselves through those audits just like our banking or regulated clients are audited. We subject ourselves to that same audit, and we can show that report to our prospects when we're working with them. So if they're not audited, or if they don't have that kind of info, then that might be a clear indication that you would look around other ways.
If I could, I would say it's really important to understand, make them show you the types of reports and communication when you're doing a vendor selection. Make them show you their reports. What am I going to get? How do I know what you're doing? How will I know that I can trust your reports? Make them talk through all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there's no greater tool probably than checking references. Any company worth their salt would give you references for other clients that have agreed to be contacted, and just ask, just like if you were going to hire an employee, always check references. So it's another good area for you to do that.
Yeah, and to that point, in that audit, or I'm sorry, in that information package that you're looking for insurance. Do they have cybersecurity insurance? Do they have E&O insurance? You're looking to see if they're getting audited by a third party, not by their own internal IT staff, but by somebody else that's subjective. In some cases, we have to supply financials to make sure that we're a stable company. That's, depending on the vendor you're talking to, that might be a little of a stretch, but asking for if they're insured, especially from a cybersecurity standpoint, is a great place to start. Asking if they get audited by a third party is a great place to start. And then it'll help you narrow down the vendors that you want to work with that are a little bit more security focused than those that are not.
Well, I'm going to send everyone your contact information after this. I know Steve's got some more questions on here. I just want to know what's a good audit look like, and I think there's a lot of business leaders in his group that I know we've had these conversations before and would benefit from knowing more about this, right, Steve? So I'm sure Steve might want to engage with you and get more information to pass on to them. If anybody else has any more questions, I know you guys don't mind folks reaching out and learning more. So I appreciate it. I'm not nearly as depressed as I thought I would be. I have to put up with two-factor authentication. I learned that, and I don't let Google save my passwords. So
those are two really good takeaways for sure.
Yeah. Well, this was great. I appreciate it. It was really informative, and I know we're all going to be impacted by this sometime in our life. Some folks on here I know already have. So we learn and hopefully get a little smarter all the time, how to stay a step ahead of the bad guys.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, thanks everyone. This was great. I love the questions, and it was very informative. So really appreciate it.
Randy, Randall, thanks for having our time, having us here. It was an honor to be a part of it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, we'll see you guys. Have a great weekend.
You bet. Take care.
You too.
Bye.